Welcome back to BDP Garage, everyone. Today I'm working on my Chevy Blazer, and in this video I'm going to show you how I replaced this rusted section of fender well that used to look like this with a custom patch panel that I made from scratch without any fancy tooling. So the unique part about the video, though, is that I'm going to show you the two ways I failed at creating that patch panel before I show you the third way that worked and got me something that looked like that. So if that sounds fun and you want to learn more, keep watching. So I was going to cut out a new square patch about that size to fit over this, but I got to thinking I have one of these other patch panels that I built as a practice for my other side of the fender, and it's already got this bead in it, and I'm wondering if I can cut a section out of this and get it to match my profile here, and then I'll already have the bead built in. So I think I'm going to try that first, so let's see how that goes. So what I got going on is this has got to make a really tight curve here, but I've got pretty straight panels. So I got out my trusty shrinking pliers and used those to put a curve into that section of panel, and you can see it's there, but the trouble I had is when I wanted to start flattening out those folds, it basically got me back to where I started, and the panel was virtually flat again. So you can kind of see that here. So I'm realizing that this may not work. But I decided to give it a try again and see if I can get that to happen better. I think the problem is that the folds or the little tucks with the pliers are way too large for doing a panel that much, and so they need to be much smaller to be able to achieve, you know, a nicer curve there. So one of the commenters that watched one of my other videos said should try doing it in stages instead of trying to get the curve all in one spot and then smashing it down. So I think I may try that here. So let's see how that works. So I got out the torch, and we're gonna do this again, so see if I could smash it a little quicker before it cools down and then won't move anymore. But didn't quite work out as I had hoped. So you can kind of see it did get a little bit of a crown, but it's still not what I need. Okay, I think I got a solution. I simply just tack welded the patch onto a flat piece of sheet metal in the curve that I need, and so plan is to just heat up those tucks there and see if we can smash them down without folding them over. And here we go again, heating it up. This actually did allow me to get the folds down. The trouble I had with this first try was that the panel was so hot by the time I heated it up, I could barely hang on to it with my gloved hand, and so it was moving around and cooling down way faster than it needed to, or than it should. Okay, so I've got a couple clamps on it, and I'm going to heat it up again here. This worked much better, and I even got a more appropriate hammer that had a little more weight behind it, so it could kind of smash those down. So that worked. Pretty flat there. These the little marks that you see on this side are actually going to be hidden, and so I think when I untack weld this, it should be fairly smooth on the outside, and if it's not, that can be hammer and dollied out a little bit. I did get a good amount of shrinkage on that curve and formed that bend. The problem is my bead is just destroyed, so I don't think this piece is going to work. So I'm going to try a plan B, and I think what that's going to be is I got this other section, and I have kind of reformed the bead a little bit on my die here. I'm going to cut this extra flange off, at least most of it, and see if I can keep the bend, and then curve it the amount I need, and then we'll weld on a pre-shaped piece there. Okay, so I got my little flange cut off here. I have to be careful running my finger. And so now it's time to see if I can get the curve in this face. Getting there a little bit. All I'm doing is, if you don't know, is I am got my jaws and my vise opened up, and I'm using kind of these as, I don't know, fulcrum points, and I'm hammering gently in there with the rubber hammer to see if I can get the thing to form around that curve. And it did form a curve, but that flange folded up just like the previous attempt, so that was a big fail. And so I knew I needed to be able to do this a little bit more professionally than using a hammer. So what I got today to help me with that is the Harbor Freight shrinker stretcher kit. I was able to create this test flange. I don't know if you can see, but there is a bead actually that I did hammer that in by hand, and so that's not with the tools, but I was able to create a nice arch in 2 different directions, and so I get this return on here, and that's going to go on the back of the fender, and I'll show you once I get it formed. I'll show you how that fits. And so this is my practice piece. What's wrong with it is my little bead detail. I don't have a bead roller, so this is done by hand. It's a little too long, and so I've got another setup here, and I'll show you on what I'm doing to create the bead without a bead roller. So that's the first step here. So what you're looking at here is this is my piece that I'm going to be hammering, and it's clamped with a piece of whatever this hardy board is, and that's to use as a guide for where my little striking tool is, which is right here. This is the same tool I used in my other video creating the other flange, and so I'm going to use this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hammer a step in this flange all the way down there, and it's just going to be a straight one. And so underneath I've got 2 pieces of sheet metal because that's the thickness of the step, and so I've got a little gap here. I think each piece of sheet metal is 50 thousandths of an inch, and so I think my total step is 0.1 inches. We're going to start right at the edge. So this is one of those cases where a bead roller would really help out I think my skill level here. So I'm essentially just beading that panel down to create a stepped section that will form the bead, and then after that I'll fold that over the edge of the table, you'll see. And so I did have some trouble. One thing you should do is I had a section of it that was unsupported kind of on the bottom of that corner, and so the bead or the step profile changed a little bit, and so that caused me a little bit of trouble that I had to fix to get it to look right and match up with the fender arch. You can see I've got a step down from this flange down to that surface, and so next step is to fold this edge over, and I'm using the edge of my table, which is nice and straight, as a way to do that. I've got a slapping tool. Is that what they really call this? I don't know. And I'm kind of using as kind of a downward strike just so it doesn't smash into the corner. It's just bending it over. And so this works pretty good. I haven't had much trouble doing this kind of thing before, but you do have to watch out that the bend radius matches what you want it to, because if you get too aggressive you can kind of create a sharper bend than you want. And so I was kind of going slow and checking and making sure that it was right before I kept going. So I think we take it out here and see how that works. And that's where that kind of section I was trying to fix. Alright, so I got my spacer. There's the flange. You can kind of see, I think this side of the bead is a little nicer. So that's what we're looking at. So I'll go measure that on the car and or the truck and make sure it's right. And then we'll see how the stretcher and shrinker work. What the idea here is that I've got on this flange here, this is my bead here, I've got to put a crown on it going this way and also this way, because well, you can kind of see this is approximately what I need from here. And so what you do here is to get this negative arch, or whatever you'd call this negative arch, you shrink this flange, and so it pulls it in together, and then this flat edge up here can naturally bend since it's, you know, the direction it's bending is in the weakest spot of the metal. And so you do the same thing with, this is the outside, is that when you want it to curve this way from straight, let's see if I can do, you want to get from here to here, you've got to stretch this edge along here so it bends and curves this around. And so maybe it's hard to see on a video, but you'll kind of see once you get it. It's pretty easy to understand once you get it. The tools themselves were not that much. I think it was 150 bucks for the set, and they were in stock, so I figured I'd give them a try. I think I spent more than that on this wooden buck and took a lot more time. So let's see. I think the first step here is to shrink, because that's the most serious, I guess, the most serious amount of metal moving. Oh, one thing I should warn you is that if you do try this, is that it puts these little marks, scratches. They're a little deeper than scratches, but they're, you know, so they put them all along the panel. And so supposedly this flange was much worse, but this I think it can get sanded out pretty easily. They're not that deep, and they're still better than the folding tucks I was getting with my earlier one, where I had heated it up and hammered it. And so this is much more rough looking than this, and so I'll take this any day. All right, enough chit chat, let's go. So we gotta shrink this short edge here. And here's my template for kind of what I'm getting for, what I'm looking for. This end near the bottom of the fender needs to be shrunk quite a bit. And so we're gonna, and so you just kind of run it through there, and the shrinker takes a little bit more effort than the stretcher, but you can see the panel curving as I move it down. Here in a sec, and show you how far I got. I don't want to over shrink it. So there's what we've got. So that's what I've got so far. Pretty decent, right? And this is what I'm going for. So I've got to get, I'm almost there, and it didn't take me, you know, less than 5 minutes. And so I think this is pretty good. Let's see, it's pretty good on the bottom half. I just need to curl this end a little more so it kind of rolls down under the fender. Kind of see that, that's that one. So let's keep going. Also not sure if I should try stretching the other side, because once I get that done, it's still just straight up and down in this orientation. But what I need to do, I need it to do this kind of a thing. And so that you stretch on that side. And so I think I may stretch now. That way, when I'm close here, and then I'll stretch it. That way I'm kind of not, hopefully not fighting each other. If anyone is really experienced at using these tools, I'd love some advice and some tips on kind of how to get better faster. So let's do the stretcher. So let's see. This one, it's just a gradual curve. And what I found is that the stretcher actually works better than the shrinker, or at least it takes a lot less effort to get the stretching to move. And so I don't know if that's something to be aware of, because if you don't, especially if you're not trying to stretch too much. So this goes pretty good, and it doesn't need to be stretched all that much, and so it's was much easier. Lots of muches in there. So I'm just going and checking and make sure it's not overly stretched. All right, let's compare. And that's there. I think we are pretty close. Oh, actually, I'm going the wrong way. Let's see. Actually, I'm pretty close. Actually, I'm gonna stick right there with the stretching because I don't want to overdo it because then I'll have to shrink. And so I think just need to finish shrinking this edge down here to curl it up. So this went pretty good after I discovered that you don't have to have the entire width of the flange inside the shrinker to actually get it to do something. Here's what I'm trying to repair. Is this bead detail has just been buggered up a long time ago, and I've got a bunch of rust and holes here. So this is what I'm looking to replace. All this MIG weld that I did years ago, just to, you know, and all of this is kind of pockmarked and ground smooth with a bunch of little tack welds, and so it's just not very, you know, and there's even a couple burn through holes here. So, and then you can kind of see the bead's okay here, and then it just gets mangled up in here. And so this whole patch was this whole patch here was a replacement wheel well, and so it stops right around here, and so that's why it starts to get kind of mangled up here. So I'm going to replace from this line all the way down, and so let's see how this fits. And that's pretty good. I mean, you can kind of see that obviously there's a step, but my bead is pretty close, and the wheel arch is not too bad, although it could be. I think that this bottom area down here can kind of tweak in a little towards the rear of the truck a little bit, but other than that, it looks pretty good. There is something going on. I don't know if you can see right at that joint. It looks like the fender kind of. Well, I can't. I need more hands. Looks like the fender itself right now is actually, it kind of flattens out right in here, so it's ground and then flattens out and then gets round again. So I think this needs to just be nice and round, and so when I cut this off, I'm gonna have to pull this little edge out. And so let's see if I can measure that too. And I bet I can measure, yeah. This is the fender. That's that straight. It's supposed to be straight, and I've got like a good ½ inch or so right there that shouldn't be there. So that fender is gonna have to come out a ½ inch or so. So let's see. I think what I need to do is I need to curve this top section right now. So I need to stretch it a little, or I need to actually I think I need to shrink this top edge just a little bit, or actually no, I think I need to unshrink it here and shrink it up here. That way it can kind of come out first before it dives back in. Actually, I wonder if I may need to cut this out first. And so that's what I did. So this little Harbor Freight grinder has really thin discs, but it really overloads quite easily, and so it has a little internal breaker that pops every once in a while that I have to reset. So okay, old school tool, slide hammer with just it's got a little hook on the end, and so I think what I can do is grab the end of this a few spots. Looks like I'm good up until here, and then just I think I'm gonna have to do it by eye for now. It's a little floppy now, so I can't judge too. Can't expect it to be perfect. little more slide hammer action and we'll be... Really need a dolly here while I'm pulling this out. Ooh, there, something moved. There we go. Alright, so there's what I've got so far. It's kind of held on with a couple magnets. I do see, if you look in here, there's a little bit of a pinch. It looks like it kind of pokes out here, but I'm not sure if it's just because the flange is stepped right there. It could be that, and I just want to make sure that this wheel arch is the right arc. So it looks close, but I'm not convinced it's right, and so I may need to shift this edge out a little more. It looks like it kind of goes out a little too far, so I may need to shrink this. Actually, I may need to shrink this area up so it doesn't arc out so far. Okay, I think I'm ready to trace this out. I've got some magnets on the back holding it in place to where I think it needs to go, and yeah, I think it's just probably time. I have to remember that this is stepped out a little bit, or by one material thickness, and so what I'll do is want to cut off the Sharpie line here so that it matches. Oops. I think I'm not brave enough to cut up right to the line just yet, but I'm for sure not brave enough, but I probably should be. So what I should have done is just cut the marker off, because that would have been almost a perfect offset of where that flange or the step thickness needs to be. So I should probably do that next time, and it'll probably work out just fine. Other problems, I think my grinding disc is getting a little small, and so it's not quite reaching where it needs to be. So I have to flip the grinder around to really cut that bottom section off. Alright, no obvious mistakes, so that's good. I think I just need to clean up that line a little bit with a grinder. Yeah, this is the part I don't like doing, because I never quite, you can never quite tell if you're goofing up the line, because as you grind, it heats up and colors the marks, and so I think it'd be great if I could be brave enough to just cut right on the line as I was cutting it, and you can kind of see takes a bit of finessing and just using the grinding wheel just to get it close, and then checking it repeatedly. That takes a long time. Okay, I think I've got this all fitted up and I'm ready to tack it on. But what I'm gonna do is start with the hardest part right here, where that bead intersects from the old panel to the new panel. I'm gonna get that tacked right where it needs to be, and then I'm gonna move along down that end that way, and I'll readjust, you know, the step between the two panels as I go along, and I'll have to manipulate that. So I'm using 030 MIG wire because it's thinner than my regular 1/16 of an inch, and I don't want to fill in the gap too much with too much weld, otherwise I'll have to grind it. So, and this is where my practice and skill level needs for TIG welding will kind of be obvious here, because still not very good at this, but I think I'm getting better. I did get a tack weld there. Probably used too much heat and a little too much filler, but it went in. And so there's a few spots where I blow through, and that's unfortunate, but I'm able to fix them okay. So now I'm gonna have to start. Ooh, that's hot. I've got a little bit of shrinking going on up here, so it's causing a step here. I can feel it, so I'm gonna have to get the hammer and dolly out and kind of squeeze that apart again. Otherwise, it'll continue tightening up all the way down here. Okay, this I learned. I should have paid attention more, but There's a YouTube channel, Make It Custom. Carl Fisher does a really good demo of how to weld in a patch panel like this, and I should have watched, or I should have found it or watched it sooner. I think maybe he put it out before I was doing this, but what I should have done is just gone down the panel and tacked without filler any of the spots that were touching, you know, where I had metal to metal contact, no gap, and then gone in and filled in tack welds every ½ inch or so, and then give it one good long, you know, just very quick weld. The trouble I had is that, and he'll describe it in the video, is that as you're welding along, every tack weld you put on shrinks, and the panel gaps get tighter and tighter as you go, and eventually you almost get, you actually get a step between the two panels, and so they don't fit together right, and so you have to kind of in between while you're tack welding, you have to kind of planish out the tack weld to stretch that tack filler material out again, so it creates the proper gap and you get rid of the step. And so that was kind of a genius observation by Carl, and it actually helped me a lot here, even though I didn't quite follow all of the recommendations. I should have clamped it in a spot and then moved and then hammered and clamped and moved again, but didn't quite. Should have just done tack welds every ½ inch or so. That would have been much easier. So, and I still need to learn how to not blow through, because you can kind of see there's a spot where I did that. So I think I just need to turn down the amperage and maybe give it a full blast of power. And then trying to weld upside down was just a dumb idea. So there's a blew through a couple holes there. I'm starting to burn a hole right in the spot I don't want to, because that's the hardest part to hammer and polish out. So I'm gonna quit while I'm ahead right there. And I may grind it on the back and try and get back to a uniform thickness. Alright, I got excited and started welding and forgot to turn the camera on, so we'll continue halfway through. No big deal, just going one by one, trying to fill in. I also am using a thicker filler rod, as you can see, because I think my panel gap was a little too large for actually someone as inexperienced as me, and so I needed a little way to cool the weld down so it wouldn't blow through the sheet metal a little bit, and also filled it in a little easier. So I'm just going to have to do some grinding, and that's unfortunate, but I think it comes out okay in the end. And we'll see that here. So some spots where I get a little too much filler on, and I try and kind of heat it up to see if I can get it to flow a little better and not build up so much, so I don't have to grind. But I'm not sure that helps much at all. And then I should have just got a new piece of filler wire instead of trying to save that tiny little piece. Let's see. So far my progress is I've gotten all this zipped up. I've got 1, 2 kind of blow through holes there. Those are gonna have to be filled. That's harder than, I think I'm gonna grind it a little bit flush so to get some of the blob of metal out of there. And then trouble is welding upside down under here is really hard, so I think what I'm going to do is just come in on the back side and weld it from the back side, because it's, you know, gravity is helping me out here. So I'm going to let the panel cool down, so I'm less likely to blow through, and try and get these 1, 2, we'll call this one, since it's extra big, two blow throughs, 2 holes there. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Be right back. So it's welded all up solid, no more holes. You can see my heat affected zone is not very consistent, so I'm not very good at this just yet. I can show you the amount of warping I got going on here, which is pretty decent. There's probably, you know, 1/8 of an inch or so in there, maybe 3/16 inch, depending on where you measure, but that I think will all come out. So let's get to work on hammering that up. Luckily I had access to the back of the panel to be able to hammer hammer this out. Otherwise it would have been much harder. So I don't seem to have much luck getting a dolly behind the panel as much as I do. This seemed to work really well. I was able to get, 3/16 of an inch movement of the metal and get that weld up to where I can grind it without touching the surrounding metal. So, and then just kind of used a series of, the grinding wheel, and then I think I had a drill, a little roll lock grinder on it, and then just kind of kept going until I was very close to flush, and then eventually we'll use a shrinking disc and some ink to really kind of fine-tune all the little dents and defects and things like that. So just kind of grinding and going back and forth with the hammer and dolly. I think we got in a decent spot. I've got it all, it's ground down smooth, it's relatively straight along the fender. I say relatively because this back fender is, I'm not sure if this back fender is supposed to be curved back as it goes back. I know this line is supposed to be pretty straight, and it's probably, oh, it might be 3/16 of an inch, bowed out. I'm not sure. I'm going to start putting some ink on this and getting the shrinking disc and kind of finding any little subtle high and low spots. But I think overall it's looking much better. So if you haven't seen Ray Chalene do this, you can check out some of his videos on the shrinking disc and ProShaper.com or ProShaperWorkshop.com or something like that. So not a whole lot of video that I recorded for that. That's what we're looking at right now. It's not too bad. I think I can kind of see there's something low going on there, and there's probably something a little low there. Actually, because there's a high spot there, so it's kind of dropping this whole area. Yeah, I can feel a little lump here. So other than that, we're pretty good. Let's take a look at it from far away. I don't see anything off, so it looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. All right, so voila. There's my patch panel fully installed. There's the bead detail, goes right along there pretty well. I also hammered it flat as it gets down to the edge, so the bead kind of dies out as it curls around that corner. There are still some little microscopic little, I don't know, steps or pores, but they're really subtle, and so I'm not quite sure how to get rid of those. If anybody has any tips, I would love to know.